This is the greatest survival story in human history. On November 4th, 1914, the British ship Endurance set sail from Plymouth, England, on a mission to become the first to cross the Antarctic continent on foot. But what should have been a journey of discovery soon turned into a desperate fight for survival when the ship got trapped in thick sea ice. Now, with no way out of this frozen hell, the 28 men aboard had only one shot at making it out alive. And that meant they had to abandon their ship and trek across the most inhospitable wasteland on Earth. With no GPS, smartphones, satellite phones, or any other modern tech, this was pure survival. This was man versus nature, and nature was winning. In this unforgiving environment, the men would face massive waves that crashed over the deck, freezing winds that bit through their coats, and temperatures that dropped to a bone-chilling 50 degrees Celsius. Although the Endurance was designed to plow through the icy water, it was no match for the immense force of nature. That's why you'll never see large ships sailing these waters today. There are just too many risks involved. But back then, these brave explorers didn't know any better. So, as the Endurance made its way south, the men knew they were in for the adventure of their lives. But what they didn't know was that disaster was lurking around every iceberg. In August 1915, after 8 months at sea, the worst happened. The Endurance was surrounded by thick sea ice. As days went by and the temperature dropped, the men began to panic. They knew they were in trouble. When the ice pressure started crushing the ship's wooden frame, the Endurance sprung a leak. There was no way out. The ship was doomed. With time running out, Shackleton ordered the crew to evacuate before the vessel sank. Everyone grabbed what supplies they could and headed onto the ice. They were now at the mercy of the elements. The men camped on floating ice sheets for 8 long months. Temperatures dropped to 60 degrees Celsius. Blizzards raged across the barren landscape, and the men were forced to ration their food. They relied on hunting seals and penguins to survive. Sometimes the men went days without food, but they had to stay strong. There was no one coming to save them. They were utterly alone. As winter turned to spring, the ice finally began to break. On April 9, 1916, Shackleton and his crew took to lifeboats and set sail over the icy seas towards the uninhabited Elephant Island 700 miles away. It was an extremely dangerous journey. Waves crashed over the boats, wind whipped across the deck, and snow blinded the sailors. But Shackleton was determined to make it to Elephant Island. He knew there was a good chance they could be rescued there. But little did he know the ordeal was far from over. After 17 days at sea, Shackleton and 5 others reached Elephant Island, but the remaining crew had to turn back. They were too weak to continue the journey. Now stranded on the island with little hope of rescue, Shackleton had to come up with a new plan. He knew that if they stayed on Elephant Island, they wouldn't survive. So he decided to take a gamble. He and 3 others would sail 800 miles in a tiny lifeboat to South Georgia Island, where they might stand a chance of being rescued. Before leaving, Shackleton divided the remaining food rations among the 4 men. Each man received 2 biscuits, 2 ounces of dried meat, half an ounce of fat, and 3 inches of tobacco. With their supplies in hand, the men set off across the stormy seas. The journey would take at least 10 days, and there was no guarantee they would make it. But Shackleton was willing to take the risk. He knew that if he didn't, they would all die on Elephant Island. Luckily, after a harrowing journey, they finally spotted land. But when they landed on South Georgia Island, they had no idea how far they were from help. All they saw were dangerous mountains and glaciers. It was too dangerous to stay on the island. So Shackleton and his crew continued their trek across the wasteland. Meanwhile, back on Elephant Island, the rest of the crew was starving and freezing. They were too weak to go on. They had no hope of rescue. The men huddled together on the ice sheets and waited for the end. Determined to find help, Shackleton and his team crossed the treacherous terrain and reached a whaling station, but there was no one there. The men had all gone home for the season. Shackleton and his team decided to stay put until someone came along. Days turned into weeks, but still no one came. Shackleton was beginning to lose hope. Then one day a miracle happened. A supply ship arrived at the station. Shackleton and his crew had been saved. But there was still one more rescue to go. Before leaving Elephant Island, Shackleton had sent word to the captain of the supply ship about the other crew members. So, when the ship docked at the whaling station, it wasted no time in returning to Elephant Island. All 28 crew members were rescued alive. It was a legendary feat of leadership and survival. Today, Shackleton is considered one of the greatest explorers of all time. His journey across Antarctica teaches us about the importance of planning ahead, working together, and never giving up. When the Endurance sank, the crew was in grave danger. But thanks to Shackleton's quick thinking, everyone survived. When the men were stranded on Elephant Island, they could have easily given up hope. But instead, they worked together to ration their food and stay warm. When Shackleton and his team set off for South Georgia Island, it was a risky move, but it paid off. If they hadn't taken that gamble, they probably wouldn't have survived. Throughout the ordeal, the crew faced unimaginable challenges, but they never lost sight of their goal: to return home safely. When the Endurance sank, the crew lost most of their supplies, including their food and warm clothing. But they quickly adapted to their new situation. They rationed their remaining supplies and made new clothing from the materials on board. They also developed a system for cooking meals on the ice. Despite the harsh conditions, the crew managed to maintain a sense of humor. They told stories and jokes to keep each other's spirits up. When Shackleton and his team reached South Georgia Island, they had to cross some of the most treacherous terrain on Earth. But they didn't complain. They pressed on because they knew that rescue was within reach. Throughout their ordeal, the crew showed incredible courage. They faced starvation, freezing temperatures, and dangerous wildlife, but they never gave up. They knew that if they did, they wouldn't survive. After spending 8 long months on the ice, the crew of the Endurance was finally rescued. It was a moment of relief and joy, but also a time to reflect on the incredible journey they had just endured. The crew had been through hell and back, but they had made it out alive. They had proven that the human spirit can endure even the most difficult circumstances. Sir Ernest Shackleton was widely respected for his leadership and courage during the Endurance expedition. He was knighted by King George V and received numerous awards and medals for his contributions to exploration. But perhaps his greatest legacy is the inspiration he continues to provide to people around the world. Shackleton's story is a reminder that even when all hope seems lost, we can endure and we can survive. It's a testament to the power of the human spirit and the importance of never giving up. What do you think? Is there anyone you admire who has shown incredible bravery and resilience in the face of adversity? We would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching.